You did it. You did it. We can just have the message right there. You're probably asking, okay, Crystal, what did I do? You closed out a really large karmic cycle. And this karmic cycle that you closed out is something that you have been struggling with, or at least living through over and over again, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. It feels like this cycle that's closing has been something that you have kind of like lived through century after century after century, life after life after life. And you finally did it. And the thing that's coming through is like choosing discomfort over dysfunction. So there was some type of situation or situations where you chose to be uncomfortable rather than just quietly move through the discomfort of the situation. And this feels like I'm getting like a tickle in my throat. This feels like a voice kind of thing. So this feels like you um finally like stood up for yourself. You finally spoke up. You finally said something. And now what's coming to me is like I'm seeing someone who has been in a situation and it feels like very family oriented, but it could be a relationship of any sort, to be honest with you. It's just someone that's close to you, where in these relationships, you were kind of taken for a ride. So, what I mean by that is like you let yourself kind of like go along for the ride in these situations. And there were many different times where you almost kind of head on collided with other cars while moving through the situation. And so like what's coming through for me is like the danger associated with the situation, you not being completely emotionally safe and then physically safe in some ways. But it feels more emotional than physical, and how you kind of like used to just like keep your mouth shut and not speak up and not say anything. And I'm hearing like you're putting your foot down now, like you're not doing that anymore. And you used to just like let these different relationships, dynamic situations kind of take you for a ride rather than speak up and talk about like how you were feeling in a situation, or like call something out that was like uncomfortable. And now that you're finally speaking up and calling things out that are uncomfortable, it does feel like it's not being acknowledged by the person that you're doing this to, or the people that you're doing this to. So, or that you're saying these things to, it feels like they're avoiding accountability, or they're not taking accountability for kind of like why this is happening. It feels very much like you're being blamed for your reaction rather than the acknowledgement of what your reaction, why your reaction happened. Like there's something about how like when you did speak up, it was kind of like silenced or ignored or just like moved on from, and like pretended like it didn't occur. And I think it's caused a lot of like confusion within you and struggle, because it took so much and it took so long for you to actually get to this point to feel confident enough and trust yourself enough to actually speak up. Like I'm kind of hearing that you like got pushed to a point. So like you like put up with it, put up with it, put up with it, put up, and then you hit a wall. And that's what feels like kind of happened, is like there was just this kind of point in time where you just could not anymore. Like it just was unbearable for you. And so you finally did say something and it just was not received well. It was ignored, it was silenced, it was like pretended like it didn't happen, swept under a rug is kind of what I'm seeing. And I think this caused like a lot of like frustration and confusion for you, but also it feels like grief as well. And you're kind of starting to understand why all of this had to happen the way that it did. So you're starting to be able to recognize like what the actual lesson here was to learn associated with this and like what this was meant to teach you. And there's a part of the situation that I think you've been able to recognize how this has been like a pattern in your life over the course of your life where you have really like done whatever you could to fit into certain situations even if they didn't feel good, and a lot of the times that kind of put you in situations where you weren't really emotionally safe and you couldn't really like use your voice or have a voice. um and so for a long time, it really kept you very like small and stunted within like your ability to grow further past that concept. I do feel like though there was a part of you that was afraid to be alone for a long time and was afraid to like be within your own company and be by yourself. So you kind of like chose engaging in these situations and dynamics rather than being by yourself because you like there's a part of me that feels like you were afraid of that, but also like you just like felt like you couldn't be alone. Um like maybe this was like something that was triggered from like, feeling like you were alone your whole life and not wanting to be anymore is kind of what's coming through too. So, I think that you're finally like closing out this cycle of silencing yourself for the peace of other people. And I think what you're realizing is that just because you are being a peacekeeper by keeping silent for other people doesn't mean that you're keeping peace for yourself, right? So you're recognizing that by staying silent, it kept the dynamic okay, right? But it kept you in a constant feeling of discomfort, uncomfortability, and like distress in some ways. And I think there was a part of you that just like thought that this was like normal and like this was just a part of like how relationships are supposed to feel or how life feels in general. And I think over this past year you've done a lot of growing and you've been able to realize that actually that was discomfort. That was not safety. That was me not being comfortable. But because that's been my experience for majority of my life, I didn't know the difference between that and what being safe actually felt like and meant. And so the collective that I'm talking to today has really been able to kind of learn how to be with themselves and has really learned how to like choose themselves over like choosing other people just to not be alone. So there's a very like deep healing around this. But this is also like shifting in the way that you are able to set boundaries with other people and say no, as well as how you're able to kind of like speak up. So I see that this collective is moving towards like more authentic expression, moving towards like only kind of like spending their energy where it feels reciprocal. So I think I think for a while, this collective used to give their energy away a lot and like did it because they felt like that's what they're supposed to do. And like kind of felt depleted by doing that all the time because they weren't receiving that back. And so I think you're finally starting to realize like how precious your energy is and how nobody else is going to protect your energy in the way that you can or that you will. And this speaking up in this dynamic or these dynamics or situations is like the first step towards you truly acknowledging how special your energy is and how much you deserve your own energy and protection. And so what's coming through is kind of like, um, you know, your inner child is finally beginning to feel safe with you because they're finally beginning to recognize that you will protect them. No matter the situation, no matter what's going on, you will protect them. And there was a time period where they were very afraid to come out because they didn't know if they would be protected. They didn't know, um, they didn't feel like you would stand up for them. And I feel like that's the energy shift that's happening right here, right now for this collective is like you're finally able to recognize that you can protect yourself. You can stand up for yourself. You can speak your truth. You can set boundaries. You can say no. And the right people will understand. The right people will respect that. The right people will hold space for that. And the people who benefited from you not having boundaries and benefited from you not standing within your strength, they're going to struggle with this change. And I think what I'm being called to say is like, that's not yours to do anything with. Oftentimes, when we've grown up in situations where we've had to try to understand the other person all the time and we are very empathetic, we're always trying to see the other point of view, trying to see the other side of things. That's not a negative thing by any means, and it has value and it has purpose at points in time. But when it comes to these situations where you're finally growing and the people around you are saying that you're changing and you're feeling like there's something wrong with that, this is not a space to try to understand where they're coming from as much as it's a space for you to take the information that's being shown to you and then make a decision based off of it. So So what I mean by that is like, these people who are saying that you've changed, you've changed, you've changed, you've actually grown and they haven't, right? And so this is the hard part when it comes to healing and growth in general is that sometimes you outgrow certain relationships and situations that you thought you would never outgrow, right? Or that you would never walk away from. And so there's this feeling that I'm getting where there's this outgrowing that's happening right now. And there's like this kind of like feeling of being, of like feeling, having a hard time leaving people behind. And I just want to say that like you're not leaving people behind, you're choosing yourself to grow. And that comes with walking away from situations, people, places, things that just don't align anymore. And that doesn't mean that it's a forever ending. But what it does mean is that it is a movement forward into more growth for yourself so that you can align with the right people, and a hope that these individuals will also grow and meet you again when they're aligned again. So, this isn't an adios amigos forever kind of thing. This is a I wish you the best on your journey. I choose myself, and hopefully one day we can walk together again. This is where detachment is so important. Like one of the spaces that detachment is so important because when you're able to recognize that you don't own anybody and nobody owns you, and there's nothing in this world that you own, you are able to recognize when things have ran their course in this current cycle or time space, so that you can move on into another cycle and course. And it's not that this person's abandoning or you're abandoning or you're rejecting or you're leaving. It's that you are recognizing that the alignment is just not there anymore. And that it's time for you to move forward in your life to reach the heights that you're meant to reach within your life. And they'll meet you when they align with that again. And some will, some won't, right? But that's not our journey. That's not ours to figure out. That's the other piece that I think is really hard for people who are empathic, like deeply, deeply empathic, is that we often struggle to let people learn their lessons. We feel like we can make that easier for them. We feel like we can teach them certain things before they're ready to learn those lessons. And the reality is that people are going to learn their things and learn their lessons when it's time for them to learn their lessons. And you can't push anybody to do that faster. You can't do that for them. And this specific collective that I'm talking to is trying to help because they don't want those individuals to go through what they went through and to feel what they did. But that's not your choice to make. That's a really tough truth. That's not your choice to make. Part of detachment is recognizing that everybody learns their lessons in their own time. And it's about just accepting people for where they're at and also accepting yourself for where you're at, right? So it's not that you're further along than them or what, you're just in a different place, and that's okay. And eventually they may catch up with you, but that's not right now. And there's nothing that you can do to drag them along with you. I feel like there's a part of me that feels like this collective tried to drag certain people and situations with you, and it got so exhausting and it got so heavy that you finally like lost your ever living shit and you popped off and you finally used your voice. That's what it feels like. And I think that, you know, the way that you thought that that would have been received is definitely different than the way that it was, but it's because the lesson that you were supposed to learn from this was much more about you learning about your own voice, when to use it, how to use it, and recognizing the people who respect it and the people that don't. Recognizing the people who see you and the people that don't. Because the people who don't respect you and the people that don't see you are the people that don't hear your voice when you say it, no matter how you say it. They're just not going to respect it, hear it. They're going to pretend it didn't happen. They're not going to engage in that, right? And so this is about like learning the difference between people who are able to hold all aspects and parts of you and respect and unconditionally love fully, and the people who conditionally love cannot fully hold all of you, really cannot hear what you're saying, and really can't handle what you're saying. So, what I'm also picking up is I think that you kind of, and I don't think this was intentional, but there was a trigger that happened here for the other people on the other side of your using your voice. And that's not your fault and that has nothing to do with you. It's their own inability to look at themselves. So this is where I say that, like, we need to be careful with how much we're trying to understand the other side and how much we're really just trying to self-soothe ourselves and take care of ourselves and move forward. Because when we are stuck in these patterns where we don't have a voice, self-soothing is understanding the other point of view so that we can understand why they're not respecting us or where that's coming from. And that's not true self soothing. That's trying to think yourself through it rather than truly just sitting with yourself, letting yourself feel the feelings of the information that has come up because of the situation, and letting yourself feel that and move through that and take care of yourself and love on yourself and keep going. There's like a kind of stuck in a thought pattern that I'm picking up on from this collective that feels like there's this like overthinking space that you're getting caught in, where you're not able to like get back into your body and ground and be present and move forward and like kind of learn the lesson. It feels like this is like a shame spiral or like a guilt spiral because of like how you've been taught, or the messaging around beliefs of what a relationship is supposed to be and what it looks like and your role in a relationship. And so this is the part where learning that lesson is important so you can let go of that cycle, drop it, and keep moving forward. Keep choosing yourself, keep loving on yourself, become your main focus rather than focusing on what didn't work out and why it didn't work out and what could have been. You can't change any of that at this point in time. And that was never meant to be something that was yours to fix. It was meant to be something that you were meant to experience and learn from so that you can turn towards yourself and choose yourself and move forward. But guilt and shame keep us stuck in those cycles. So until we can find a way to take care of ourselves through that, ground ourselves through that, right? Self soothe through that, and let ourselves forgive. That's what's coming through very strongly. So this is not just forgiving them, but comes back to forgiving yourself for choosing those things, forgiving yourself for staying in them for so long, forgiving yourself for putting up with it for so long. And when you are able to forgive them and forgive yourself for these kinds of things, that is when you can truly be free from these thought patterns, free from these cycling of thoughts and beliefs. So I started this message with you did it, because you did do it. And intuitively, you were feeling guided to speak up. You were feeling guided to stand up for yourself. But the aftermath is definitely a hard thing to navigate when you're unsure of how to do that and how to forgive yourself and love on yourself and self soothe in a way to move forward. And so you are closing out a huge cycle. And this is like the last little step that you're in before you finally reach the other side. I'm seeing somebody walking through a really dark tunnel and they can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but they're not there yet. And they're so close, so close. And it's about learning how to shift those thought patterns, learning how to forgive yourself, learning how to self soothe and be present with yourself, and learning how to be at peace and acceptance with what was. That is the part of attachment that is hard for people, is just accepting that things are what they are and we can't control that. And so what do we need to do to accept that? What do we need to do to release it? What do we need to do to let go of control of it? That's the hard part. So you're so close. You just have this little shifting to do a little bit. And this is more so like internal kind of thought pattern work and stuff. And you will be out that tunnel into the light. And it's beautiful and warm and happy over there. So trust in yourself, believe in yourself. Try to see if you can think about this a little bit differently to free yourself of the thought patterns and the cycles that you've been in. Be patient with yourself. This is the first time you're doing this ever. So it's okay that it feels difficult and it's okay that you're getting stuck. Be gentle and kind and loving with yourself as you move through this difficult last little piece before you reach the final movement out the cave. So if you would like a private reading with me, I also do empowerment coaching, which I teach people boundaries and all of these types of how to move through this, self forgiveness, things like that. I also offer spiritual guidance. Please take a look in my bio. And as always, keep going, sweet soul. You got this. Love you.